Hello everyone, you already know it's the last video of the 3-string series and we're not going to waste any time here. We're going to jump right into it. The fundamental I want you to keep in mind for this lesson is to stretch out your hands. Some of these are pretty easy, some of these shapes that I'm showing you, but some of the other ones, 4 and 5 strings, have some very awkward jumps, particularly maybe with your ring or pinky, and it just feels very awkward. It can feel like there's strain on your tendons. So whatever you have to do, stretch out your arms and your wrists. There's no real right or wrong way to do this. And since this is 16 and a half tips and tricks for mastering sweep picking, the half tip that I want to show you is about the picks. So as much as I'd like to say that there's a pick that you should be using or that I recommend the pick that I'm using, there really isn't. The best way to figure out which one is ideal for you is to just test out as many picks as you can. I would say 10 to 15, maybe even 20 to find a winner. And you'll notice that there's a bunch of different ones that all just have a different effect. Here we have maybe like what looks like a see-through, but it's a 2mm. It's a little bit smaller. It has kind of like a jazz tip on it. There's, even some of these metal ones, they might be helpful for you. Not so much for me. I got it as more of a novelty. We have these old Dunlop Ultex. This is a .88. This is really helpful. Some of these sound better than others, but it all depends on your preference or what you find better. So don't take anyone's word for it. Go out, test 10 to 15 picks, and find which one works best for you. I've had this one for years. This is a Tortex from a long time ago. Really thick pick as well. Also experiment with different shapes. We have one of these Fender triangles, so you might like it because the tips give you sharper articulation on the notes. We have these other special ordered triangles that are a little bit thicker. We have what looks like another jazz tipped pick over here, but it's a little bit bigger. See, they're all different. Some of the ones I recommend are these, which have like a little bit of sandpaper in the middle. This is an extra heavy. Or maybe one of the star picks. I know you all have heard of these. These are super popular everywhere. Get your hands on some of these if you want, because they're very helpful. You're never going to lose grip of them. And maybe just one more. I mean, look, this one looks like it was stamped out of a credit card. I have a bunch of them, all different too. Another Fender-esque type of pick there. Finally, like another Fender, like a jazz tipped type of thing as well. Tip number 10 was going to be to double pick all of the notes so that it can help not only for your ear to recognize the notes you're playing, but it'll help both your right hand and your left hand because it'll slow you down, etc., etc. It'll teach you to articulate the notes more cleanly. And I know you learned the triplet, but this is going to be double picking, which again supplements your capacity to alternate pick back and forth, back and forth. Tip number 11 is to switch the articulation that you have when you're doing the sweep. So that one's a little bit complicated to explain. What that means is that you are at the point where you can play some of the notes well enough and maybe even play the whole sweep slowly enough so that you can now begin to use this technique to improve your speed. So what this is basically you take however many notes you can play in a certain rhythm, so it sounds like a totally different melody because all of the notes are not played out for the same amount of time. But for you, it might be easy to play them that way because you at least get those little pauses in between the notes so that you can catch up with yourself as well. So. Maybe it'll sound something like that. But again, the purpose of that tip in particular is so that you can use the pauses that you're naturally taking because you can't, maybe not, maybe you can't play it proficiently just yet, but you're using those pauses to your advantage and turning them into a learning tool. And tip number 12 was to use kind of a pseudo sweeping pattern or a chord shape to learn the sweeping pattern. So with this, the major shape that we have here, you have what looks like a D major, but you have it on the 9th fret here, these 3 notes. And remember, you already know how to articulate them with the right hand. But all your fingers are stationary. So what I mean by pseudo sweep pattern or pseudo sweep picking exercise is to hold as many notes as you can and try to sweep that way, because as a pseudo sweeping shape, practicing it will definitely help you in the long run, because what it teaches you is the correct positions that your fingers are supposed to be. It also teaches you what the notes are supposed to sound like when they all ring out so that they sound clear. And finally, it teaches you to slow down and articulate the notes properly, but from a position that's easier than the sweep itself. If you haven't noticed already, you'll see that the rest of the tips, tricks, and fundamentals are also in the description below, in addition to a couple of links to some great resources that I've used over the year. Guitar Tricks is pretty great. So let's not waste any time here again. Minor shape. Again, tip number 10 was to double pick all the notes in the shape. So maybe instead of holding a major, you'll hold them minor now, here. So maybe you want to learn this in conjunction with the triplet and rest mid. But now you're just double picking the notes. But now at least you're learning articulating every note with a couplet as well as a triplet. So compare that to. So all that extra switching and flipping that you have to do is just going to further develop your right hand articulation. Tip number 11, switch up the timing articulation to improve fluidity. So maybe you have this. So it sounds like a rhythm, sounds like it's something totally unrelated from the sweep, and maybe you need help getting all the notes back. So that eventually, when you learn it that way and you learn it kind of at an off rhythm or an off beat, whatever, you can start to slowly paste it all back together and push the notes together so that they all ring out for the same amount of time. So from slowly start to work up the pace and even make a totally new articulation, timing articulation. So it sounds totally different, but again, it's all going to develop your muscle memory further so that you have nice, clean sweeps. And lastly, tip number 12 for the minor shape, use an existing chord shape like we did before as a pseudo sweep pattern so that you can get yet another exercise tool. That's what I do, is I just hold the minor triad that we have right here and add the first note as a pull-off. So this pattern slows down my left hand, but it teaches me what it's supposed to sound like in addition to help improve fluidity as well. And now finally, for all of y'all that had preferred the diminished shape, here's tip number 10 and what it sounds like. It's going to be a little bit harder. It's going to be like playing each note individually. But this will at least slow you down, and it'll make sure that you have a pace with which to pick all the notes with your right hand, and it marks a pace for you to move your left hand. So yes, it is kind of slowing you down maybe from what you've learned, but that's a good thing because now you'll have more cohesive, better put together sweeps. Number 11 was to switch up the timing articulation to improve fluidity again. So use any rhythm that you want that can stitch together some of the ends that aren't fully integrated. So maybe I can do that in that rhythm, but maybe not quickly because I'm not so developed yet. But if I can go that far, and then maybe I have another chunk that sounds like this. Maybe I can do it. Maybe I can do the extra note every other time. Whatever it is, what you're using is the disadvantages you had before in your favor. So that eventually you're putting together all the notes so that they sound clean and all the notes ring out for the same amount of time. And then finally, use an existing sweep or the exact sweep itself as kind of a pattern so that you can practice. So whenever you're not moving your left hand and you're not practicing that in particular, you can still supplement your entire sweep picking capacity with a chord that's totally unrelated. Maybe we have something like a D dominant here. So basically you can, the shape that you learn doesn't really need to have anything to do with what you're learning. Although it could, you could have something like this. Whatever works best for you. So the purpose of that tip is to just be as an extra tool that you can use to master this even quicker. But with that, thanks to y'all for sticking around this long. That concludes the end of the 3-string series. I'm looking forward to y'all checking out the videos that are going to come after this, where I'm going to introduce the 4-string shapes. Format's going to be a little bit different, so since I've already explained all of the tips and tricks, again, also down in the description, I'm just going to run through the individual shapes, one per video, really quickly, and then demonstrate briefly all of the tips and tricks, just in case that you need them. And I'm going to be covering that as well. So yeah, if y'all want to stay tuned, take a look at the next couple of lessons that are coming out. I'm glad y'all have made it this far. See you on the next video.